When Terminal Lance, before it existed, there wasn't anything like it. And when I say that, I mean, like, there was one comic strip that I can think of called Semper Tunes by Gunny Wolf, which some of you are, I'm sure all of you might have heard of at some point. And he, he's a great guy. He's a gunnery sergeant doing a comic strip. It's in Leatherneck magazine. It's really like, hoorah, Semper Fi Marine Corps kind of thing. But I found that my experience in the Marine Corps was so different than that. I found that the people that I served with, these are Iraq veterans. This is a war that was not popular. It's a war that has a lot of infamy behind it. And I found a lot of my generation was not as hoorah, Semper Fi. And I felt like that comic didn't really speak to the generation of Marines that I knew, that I had been around the last 4 years. And so I wanted to make a comic that really resonated with that generation of Marines, that really spoke to the OIF, OEF generation of Marines. So that was really why I did Terminal Lance, and that's why I keep doing Terminal Lance. I had this idea for a book, and I had wanted to do this book for a really long time. I actually have files on my computer that are illustrations of the White Donkey from all the way back to like 2011. But I had actually initially thought of the idea in 2010. That was when I really came up with the idea of the White Donkey, the graphic novel. At this point, I wasn't even calling it the White Donkey. This was just a graphic novel about the Marine Corps, about Terminal Lance that I wanted to do. So there is a story behind this White Donkey. When I was in Iraq the first time, I was part of a mounted platoon. We were company jump platoon, and we were traveling down Zidon Road, southeast of Fallujah, in the Zidon region of Iraq. It's a little place along the Euphrates River. So this is one of my first times outside the wire ever, and I'm like scared out of my mind. So the thing, they tell you in training, oh, you got to look out for anything suspicious in the road. You have all these IED courses that you go through. You do a little walk-through IED course, and they're like, oh, look out for any craters or trash or wires or anything that looks suspicious, because it could be a bomb and it could blow up and you're going to die. So that was great training. What they don't tell you is that it's a third world country, and when you get there, when you get it, you're looking around. There's trash and craters and shit everywhere. And I was pretty convinced I was going to die. Like, I'm on my first combat patrol, and I'm like, this was the dumbest idea I've ever had in my life. Why am I here? I'm going to die right now. All of a sudden, our convoy comes to a complete stop. And I remember this because my platoon commander gets on the hook, and he's all like, hey, Vic 1, this is Vic 2. Why do we stop? And I hear back over the radio from my section leader, Corporal Albrecht, who is in the book too, there is a donkey in the road. And I was like, what does that mean? So, what does it mean? So I went, I remember looking toward the front of the convoy, and this donkey it wasn't just like stuck in the middle of the road. No, it wasn't dead, it was alive. It wasn't crossing the road. It was walking in the same direction that we were going, dead center in the middle of the road. And there wasn't enough room on either side of it to go around it. And it was like the donkey was leading us, it was leading this convoy. And that image just like would not, so in real life, the donkey trotted along for maybe like 10 meters, and then it just sort of trotted off the side of the road. We drove past it, and I never saw it again, which is weird because we drove by that same spot every single day for the next 7 months, and I never ever saw the White Donkey again. Never have ever seen a White Donkey since then. Kind of weird. And I guess there were a couple of things about that really stood out to me. For one, I'd never seen a white donkey before. It was the first time I ever saw one. And two, there was something about that image of the donkey. So here we are, 5 vehicles, 5 mounted vehicles full of Marines, full loaded to the teeth. We have every weapon you can imagine. We got machine guns, we got rifles, we got grenades, we got grenade launchers, and 23 Marines, and the power and might of the United States military behind us. And we were brought to a screeching halt by this most benign animal, this stupid ass of an animal, this silly creature. And I like to think that it really made us all look like asses that day. And that image just like wouldn't leave my mind. It was a really powerful thing for me, and it sort of plagued my existence. I was like, man, this donkey, what does it mean? And so that sort of informed the overarching narrative for the White Donkey, the book. I love making Marines laugh. That's sort of the point of Terminal Lance. and I intend to continue doing that. Terminal Lance, though, is now part of a corporation, owned by a corporation, which I just started officially. So my new corporation is called The White Donkey. And the future for me is animation. What I want to do is build an animation studio, and I want to tell stories like I do with Terminal Lance and The White Donkey, and I want to do it with animation in feature film and TV, and I want to do it in a way that nobody has ever seen before. I'd go to the Iraqi police and I'd be like, hey, I'd try to talk to them and interact with them and stuff. And I never really had any like really deep conversations with the Iraqi police, but in the book I wanted to put that perspective in there because I didn't want the story to feel so one-sided, and I didn't like the idea that somebody could reach a sort of, I think that it takes a lot of self-reflection to be able to take a step back and say, is this existential crisis, is the answer to my existential crisis, my enlightenment, is it okay to reach that at the expense of other people in a war that is killing many people, in a war that's taking place in another country? This experience of mine in Iraq was never really mine. I was part of this greater narrative in Iraq that was taking place, and I took part in that. But I don't own that experience. It wasn't really mine. I was going through like this 19-year-old, existential crisis of like, I need to do something crazy. I was like, I need to do the craziest thing I could possibly think of, and I had a bunch of scenarios in my head. I'd just seen Batman Begins. I think that was just when that movie came out, and I was like, man, I'm just gonna like jump on a boat and like go train with ninjas. Like that's, I gotta do something. But the real reason is because I am, at the end of the day, before I'm a Marine, before anything else, I'm an artist. I'm a creator. And I knew that I wanted to create stories and work in art, but I needed some worldly experience. I needed something to like really back my own stories up, I guess. And so I needed to see something terrible. And so I guess my reaction to that was, what's the craziest thing I could do right now? And the war in Iraq was going on. This is 2006. And I was like, I'm going to join the Marine Corps Infantry. I'm going to go to Iraq. Well, it was mostly I want to go to Iraq. And then I was like, what's the quickest way to get to Iraq? Join the Marine Corps Infantry. So I went to the recruiter. Actually, funny story. At Portland Community College, there was a recruiting desk. These two guys they were set up at a recruiting desk there. And I had been thinking about it over the last like week or so, and then Sergeant Gilbert, he was a scout sniper. He just randomly, I walked by him, civilian Max, and he's like, "Hey, you ever think of joining the military?" And I was like, "Yes, I have." And I sat down. It was the easiest recruiting he's ever done in his life. And then he's like, "Oh, cool, you should come by the recruiting station tomorrow." And I was like, "Okay." So then I did, and then I just sort of enlisted from there. I scored like a 92 on the ASVAB when I took it, and then my recruiter was like, "You can do anything you want, really." And I was like, "Oh, cool, I want to go infantry." And he was like, "Are you sure?" Because you don't have to. And I was like, "Yeah, but what's the point if I don't go infantry, So that was, hoorah! So that's what I did. And that's sort of the story of how I enlisted.
That's one recruiter that went home and looked himself in the mirror and probably said, "Damn, I'm good."
I was worried, I think, when I first started writing the book, like, are people going to think this is some kind of like, people often say that there's a cliche of veterans with PTSD. There's a cliche of veterans with emotional issues and stuff when they come back from deployment. But I think that what that statement sort of grossly ignores is the idea that we still have, and there's actually a study just came out today, 20 veterans killing themselves every day. It's not 22, it's 20. 20 veterans killing themselves every day. And that's a very real issue. So at what point does it stop being a cliche and actually become a serious issue that we kind of need to talk about? And for my own experiences, I mean, I found when I came back from Iraq the first time, I was so angry, and I'm sure every veteran that's been there can relate to that. It's like, you feel like everything that people say to you is like an affront to your manhood. You're like, oh, how dare you say that to me? I just came back from Iraq. Where have you been? You know, and like we all feel that. Like you just feel so angry when you come back. And so that experience is very real, and that's something that I wanted to sort of explore what the White Donkey is really right about. And really, it's sort of cathartic for me to think about it, like, why am I doing this, you know? And by putting that out there, by putting that into a narrative form that people can read and understand and digest, I think it helps them gain a better understanding. Not even just civilians that aren't familiar with it, but Marines gaining a better understanding for their own emotions, I think, is something that is one of the goals I had with the book. What the Marine Corps gave me more than anything else is just the ability to keep going, like through anything, like no matter how shitty it gets, like just because it could always be worse. And that's what I can always tell myself now. Like for the rest of my life, I'd be like, yeah, at least I'm not in Iraq anymore. Like at least it's not like that, you know. Like it could always be worse, and that's I think the greatest thing that the Marine Corps did for me, and just being exposed to that like just terrible lifestyle of being in the field all the time and eating MREs and like just how miserable it really gets. And that's what I always like to do with Terminal Lance. I think that one of my section leaders explained it to me a long time ago while I was active duty. Corporal Morton, amazing guy. He said that Marines are so close, you gain a brotherhood with Marines that you can't get with anybody else. And the reason for that is because you unite behind a common enemy, which is the Marine Corps. And so, as I like to always say, people ask me if I've ever missed the Marine Corps, and I always tell them I miss the Marines a lot more than I miss the Marine Corps.